Welcome back. Last time, we looked at the AI surge. Our verdict was pretty clear. This is a historic boom. But a really compelling new critique has popped up, one that actually questions the entire foundation of AI's insane growth. Some folks are even calling it the smoking gun of a bubble. So today, we're going to dig in and find out if they're right. Okay, so let's get right into it. The accusation is actually pretty simple, but it's powerful. The idea is that these massive revenues we're seeing in AI, well, they might just be built on a clever trick called circular financing. Basically, big tech gives money to a startup, and that startup immediately gives it right back to buy cloud services. So is this whole thing just phantom revenue? Could this be the one fatal flaw in the AI boom that everybody missed? And this lays out the argument perfectly. It's like a financial Ouroboros, the mythical snake eating its own tail. So here's how it goes. Step 1. A tech giant invests in a promising AI startup. Step 2, that startup turns around and uses that exact same cash to pay for the massive computing power it needs from the very same tech giant. And then step 3, voila, that spending gets booked as pure revenue on the big guy's balance sheet. I mean, I'm sure looks like growth, but the critics are asking a very fair question. Is any of it real? So, to properly investigate this claim, we can't just rely on gut feelings, right? We need to go back to our framework, our clear, data-driven way of telling a healthy, sustainable boom apart from a really dangerous bubble. Okay, so just a quick refresher, because this is the whole ball game. In a boom, yeah, things might get a little overheated, but eventually the fundamentals, we're talking real customers, real cash flow, they catch up and justify all that initial optimism. A bubble, though, is something totally different. That's when valuations completely detach from reality. And it doesn't just lead to a little dip, it leads to a catastrophic sustained crash. Think 50% or more for 5 years, maybe even longer. And if you remember our 5-gauge dashboard, we landed squarely in boom territory. We had 4 green lights. Only one was red, and that was for industry strain, which made sense given how fast everything's moving. Our rule of thumb was simple. 2 reds means we've got trouble. But here's the thing. This new critique of circular financing doesn't just nibble around the edges. It takes a direct shot at one of our most important gauges, funding quality. And that is exactly where our investigation has to begin. Because this accusation, it sounds eerily familiar. It brings back some pretty bad memories of the late 90s telecom crash, where a very similar kind of financial loop had absolutely devastating consequences. So the big question is, are we just watching a rerun? All right, now this is the single most important difference. It all comes down to the kind of money we're talking about. See, the telecoms bubble was fueled by fragile, risky debt. Companies like Lucent would loan money to tiny operators who'd then use that borrowed cash to buy Lucent's gear. It was a house of cards. When the startups failed, they defaulted, and it triggered a massive wave of bankruptcies. Today's AI boom, on the other hand, is funded by equity. This quote just captures that whole disaster perfectly. The demand simply wasn't there yet. You had millions of miles of fiber optic cable just sitting in the ground, unlit. So when the music stopped, the whole system collapsed because it was built on a mountain of credit risk. In the AI world, it's different. If a startup fails, the big tech investor just absorbs an equity loss. It's a much cleaner system with no debt overhang to poison everybody else. Okay, another critical piece of context here is just the scale of this whole thing. Right now, this loop is actually pretty small. I mean, according to Goldman Sachs, these kinds of deals are projected to make up less than 15% of NVIDIA's revenue even 4 years from now. So while it's definitely something to watch, it is not the main engine of growth here. The real driver? Well, that seems to be something else entirely. And here it is. The biggest, most profound difference from the telecom era is this. The demand is undeniably, explosively real. Remember all that unlit fiber? Well, today's AI infrastructure is roaring to life the second it's switched on. We're talking 40% adoption in US households in just 2 years. That's faster than the internet. You have Anthropic's revenue jumping 5 times over in less than 6 months. And it's not just hype. Big companies like JP Morgan are already seeing $1 in savings for every dollar they spend on AI. Okay, so we've stress-tested this whole critique against history, against the current market. Now it's time to go back to our dashboard and deliver the final verdict. Did the critics' smoking gun actually hit the target? And the answer, it turns out, is no. Look, the critique is valid, it's important to think about, but it's more of a glancing blow than a fatal one. Our analysis shows the funding quality gauge is holding steady in the green. And that means the structural integrity of this AI boom is still very much intact. We are still in a one red light scenario. So why does the gauge hold? It all comes back to what we just talked about. This funding isn't fragile debt. It is primarily equity. And it's being backstopped by the colossal balance sheets of the Magnificent Seven, companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. These guys are sitting on a combined $606 billion in cash. They are funding this build-out from their own massive profits. This is cold, hard cash, not borrowed money. But this investigation doesn't mean we just get complacent. Not at all. In fact, it means we need to update our playbook. All the original advice still stands. Focus on the Mag 7, monitor the key metrics, keep cash on hand for dips. But we are adding a brand new crucial line item: scrutinize funding transparency. The moment these equity deals start to get murky, or worse, if they start to shift towards the kind of debt that sank the telecom sector, that's when the real warning bells should start ringing. Which leaves us right here. The AI story is still a powerful, historically significant boom, not a systemic bubble waiting to pop. But the questions raised by this circular financing critique, they're vital. They are exactly the kind of skeptical, tough analysis that keeps investors sharp, grounded, and prepared. Because you know what? The biggest risk isn't asking the tough questions. It's ignoring them. Stay vigilant.